Hi everybody, this is Noelle for Petitti Garden Centers, and we are going to do a plant spotlight on phlox today. And there's a couple different varieties out there that you'll see at the garden center. So we'll talk about all those varieties and of course the care of each, but they're all a little bit similar. So we'll start out with their sun requirements. The most popular and the earliest blooming variety is going to be Creeping Phlox. And sometimes it's called mossy phlox. Sometimes it's called ground cover phlox. Just kind of depends where you are and what you're trying to plant and how you're trying to identify that flower. But that phlox is actually native to Ohio. All of the varieties that you see, of course, are cultivated varieties, so it would be more like a nativar. And because of that, Creeping Phlox is really nice to have and grow in a lot of different areas in the garden. And so we find that they grow best in full sun conditions to part shade conditions. So you can go basically, let's say 6 hours or more, or 6 hours to about 4 hours. That's that part shade condition. So again, look for that for Creeping Phlox. They do great under trees where they get some shade canopy, and just at the ends of the day or the beginning of the day when they get that sun underneath the canopy, that works fine for them. That can go for most of the phlox as well. So really looking for that full sun to part shade condition. However, there are some woodland phlox that I'm going to explain in a little bit, and they probably will burn up in too much sun. So if you can put them in an eastern exposure, morning sun and evening shade, I think they'll be really happy with that. But again, might need a little bit more shade and a little bit more moisture to keep them happy and really looking nice throughout the growing season. Soils. With any of your phlox, try to create a well-drained soil condition. Yes, we have a lot of clay in Northeast Ohio, so anytime you can add organic amendments to that soil, absolutely do so. So add your planting mix, your sweet peat, what have you, to that soil. Mix it about 50-50 again with your clay soil, and that will help increase drainage, but of course help these plants out and make sure that they're not sitting in water. They can go slightly dry and they can be slightly moist. We just don't want them to be really, really wet, and we don't want them to totally dry out like in a rock garden. So be careful with that as well. Other things to look for. Water. Watering is just average with these plants. When you get them established, it's like any other plant out there from the garden center. You really want to water 1 inch of water 1 time per week, thoroughly and deeply, okay? If it's raining, and we've had quite a rainy spring so far, no problem whatsoever. If the rain gauge is up to 1 inch of rain, you don't have to worry about that plant for that week, okay? So keep that in mind. Feeding these guys, just like any of your standard perennials, we typically want to feed them a dose of plant tone and iron tone in the spring for the spring feeding. And then Angelo likes to add Osmocote midsummer for kind of a fast but long release all through the rest of the growing season. So do consider that when you're fertilizing. And of course, that's always going to help kind of keep the bloom cycle going. Even though these are spring bloomers, the Creeping Phlox are, and actually most of your phlox are that you're going to see today, they can be cut back and fertilized, and they do end up producing more blooms. It's not as great as the first bloom cycle, but sporadic blooms after that. So keep an eye on them and they'll really do well for you. With uses, I'm going to tell you Creeping Phlox, like I mentioned before, edging plant. You can put it on in a rock garden area. Just make sure you're getting moisture to that area, okay? Walls, little garden areas in between step stones, they do wonderfully in that type of capacity. And again, are really adaptive to just about any garden spot. So keep that in mind. They really do a nice job for us. They're also a good pollinator attractant, not so much the hummingbirds because we don't really have those intense pink and red colors here, but the bees and the butterflies absolutely will definitely go towards your Creeping Phlox varieties, no problem. There are several varieties here, all different colors, so I'm going to show you those as well. You can see we have whites, we've got blues, we've got pinks. So a couple different things here. This large pink variety that I have right here in front of me, this is Drummond Rose. It is really probably the largest flowering Creeping Phlox variety that we grow. Darkest pink is going to be Scarlet Flame. It has a nice red eye to it. Taylor will show you a close-up, really detailed flower when you get really close into the Creeping Phloxes. Emerald blue is going to be that light pastel blue, sort of a sky blue. Has a little bit of periwinkle or violet in the flower, but your best blue that you're going to find. We have two whites. Actually, Amazing Grace is really pretty. It is a white petal, but it has a little bit of a red eye, so it's got a bicolor look to it. But we have this one. This is so cute. This is Snowflake. Snowflake is actually probably one of the smaller flowering types. Almost looks like a verbena to me a little bit. But again, if you're looking for pure white, try the Snowflake Creeping Phlox. Really, really cute. And then, of course, we have Candy Stripe. And Candy Stripe's always a favorite. She's actually a white and pink striped variety. So really nice with the Phlox subulata or Creeping Phlox or Mossy Phlox, whatever you'd like, okay? The other variety that I have here that's blooming really nicely, I have these two blue varieties. These are both what we call Woodland Phlox. They're divaricata, okay? So Phlox divaricata. And really what I was talking about earlier, they'd like to be in that part sun condition, that 4 to 6 hours of sunlight. If they get too hot, too much sun, they probably will burn out for you. What's really interesting about these is they grow more upright than your Creeping Phlox. You usually get anywhere from, let's say, 10 to about 16, 18 inches with them in growth, okay, in height. They will spread, and I should have mentioned that with the Creeping Phlox. Creeping Phlox only grow maybe 3 to 6 inches tall, but they can spread about 2 feet wide, one plant of Creeping Phlox. So they will kind of fill in like a ground cover. These are a little bit more clump varieties, so they will grow a little bit taller, but they don't spread out to that 2 foot mark, probably closer to about 12 to 18 inches wide. So again, more of a clump form of phlox. What's really great about them is that you get those true blue colors in the garden, which sometimes it's hard to come by. So growing this type of phlox, at least you get to introduce that. And I will have to say, Blue Moon is wonderfully fragrant. It has a very, very soft, but really, really wonderful perfumey fragrance to it. So if you're looking for some fragrance in the part shade garden, kind of as a low border perennial plant, boy, this one's really great. Chattahoochee right here is a little bit different. It's got a darker blue, but it's got a really pretty sort of pinkish violet eye in the center. And it has more of a sprawling habit to it. Again, not quite ground cover, just kind of opens up a little bit more as it grows. But again, really pretty, very different, and again, very adaptable to our soils and our landscape conditions. So that's really nice. The last phlox that I'm going to mention is actually Phlox Paniculata. And it sounds like, oh, I know that word from panicle hydrangeas, Paniculata hydrangeas. Well, there is a phlox that is the panicle type, really produces large panicle flowers on top of its stems. And it's actually also known as Tall Phlox or Garden Phlox. This is what it looks like at this time of year. So you will only see the foliage in the springtime. These beauties really don't bloom until midsummer. So that's when you start to see those tall garden phlox or paniculata phlox come out. And they are very, very fragrant, beautiful colors, everywhere from pastels to like deep, rich corals and pinks, even blues in that family. So really pretty. But of course, because they're summer bloomers, we can't quite show you right now, but Taylor will show you pictures, of course, of what they'll look like. And with this type of phlox, they really do like the full sun to part shade conditions. Again, much taller than the other two varieties we've already discussed. These can grow usually around 18 inches to about 4 feet in the garden. So again, this might be a middle border or even back of the border in the perennial garden. They do make beautiful cut flowers. Most of the varieties are very, very fragrant and are hummingbird attractants, along with bees and butterflies as well. So you will see these grow up. I do want to tell you that phlox in general can be fairly deer resistant, except for the tall garden phlox. So do watch out for these. They do get browsed, they do get eaten. So be aware of that. And also with these guys, they tend to get some powdery mildew during the summer months, especially kind of lower on the leaves. As they grow taller, sometimes the leaves will start to yellow and kind of drop from the base of the plant on up. So it's very important to have good air circulation around these plants. So make sure with your tall garden phlox that you space them out if you're using them in the garden to make sure you get good air circulation around them. Try to reduce that powdery mildew that does occur with these plants. And better varieties, newer varieties, definitely have increased their mildew resistance. But again, just depending on how humid and wet the summers are, they can get that. So keep that in mind when you're planting them. Other than that, phlox again is very adaptive, native to, again, the subulata is native to Northeast Ohio. The rest of the varieties are native to the United States. So they really do a great job for us. Great way to bring in color, hummingbirds, butterflies, bees, and just grow really easy. Enjoy.